everyone. I'm Ella, Matt Brown's daughter, and I came up here today to talk to you guys about my dad and to introduce him to you. Over the past few weeks, I have seen him be his work mode self. And that is how all of you guys see him. But you're probably wondering what he's like as his non-work mode person. I'll start off by saying he's a great dad, and he and my mom make decisions that I usually don't agree with at the time. But when I look back, they are always decisions that my brother and I have become better people with. He is always willing to play lacrosse with me in the backyard or baseball with my brother. But he does things for everyone, not just our family. He gives to homeless shelters, he helps people who are needed on the street, and he also cares a lot about the earth and the climate change. My dad will pick up litter on the street, although some of the stuff is gross. He also cares about the beauty of Rhode Island, so he will always choose to drive or walk through the pretty streets rather than the faster but less pretty streets. Those are some things he does, but now I'll tell you what his personality is like. He is funny, although some of his dad jokes aren't the best. He is adventurous. He goes to water parks and amusement parks and rides all the rides possible. He is interesting and knowledgeable. My dad will sometimes have long talks with my brother about the Big Bang and many more science things I don't understand. He is a great speaker and writer, which means I sometimes get sucked into his stories about his brother or stories from high school and college. I think he would be an amazing governor, and he cares a lot about Rhode Island. I could go on and on and on. Those are just some things about him that you now know, and now I'll introduce him to the man you have all come here to see. Let's all give a warm welcome to the future governor, my dad, Matt Brown.
Thank you, Ella. When you've raised a daughter like that, I'm not sure I need to be governor. I think I'm done. I think I've done my part for the world. And my son Walker, they're very competitive, so I can't leave them out. Also, for the TV guys who've recorded that, I want a recording of the clip where she said that we are always right. Even when she disagrees with us, we're making her a better person. Even less TV watching now for you. Marilyn, Maggie, Janine, thank you so much for your words, for your leadership, friendship. The state and the world, I really felt sitting in the back listening to you I believe is going to be in good hands, and I think we're going to get to that world that we're all looking for. So as you have seen, I'm very blessed, and I've always been blessed to have a great family and great friends. And I want to, first of all, thank you all for coming. And it's great to see many old and dear and newer friends here. I want to start tonight by talking about an old friend of mine who's not here, who is a mentor of mine, named John Lewis, the civil rights hero. John Lewis, who led the march in 1965 across the Edmund Pettus Bridge and was billy clubbed into unconsciousness and gassed in seeking voting rights for African Americans. And I have been fortunate enough to be his friend and to be mentored by him, and we have spent a number of late nights sitting together and talking about social justice and how to make the world what we want it to be. I do the question asking, and he does the answering. I call it going to the church of John Lewis, and I do it whenever I can. And he said to me once that when you're up against a system that is wrong and that is hurting people, but it seems to have all the power, the first thing you need to do is get in the way. That's right. Just get in the way. Yes. think that's why we are all here tonight. I think that's why you came, because you want to get in the way of this system, and so do I. It is a system that is broken. It is a system that is hurting people and causing a lot of pain. And I think the first thing we need to do is be more truthful about where this system came from, about how we ended up here, and about what it's going to take to get ourselves out of this. So the truth is that this system has been aided, coordinated, and abetted by our own government for a very long time, and it still is doing that. It is a system that has worked to enrich large corporations, large banks, and the very few wealthiest at the top at the expense of all of the rest of us in our communities. That's why we've ended up in the situation we're in today here in Rhode Island, where the costs of everything that people need, housing, healthcare, childcare, college, everything people need, has gone up and up and up and up over 40 decades and is still going up, and wages and income have stayed the same. That's the only economic fact that matters to people. The stock market, GDP, what matters in people's lives is that they cannot afford the things that they need. And it's getting worse. And they're worried. And they're worried about their children, because where is this going to end up, because nothing's changing. And we see all this, and we know this. And so we have to ask ourselves, why doesn't it change? Why does it continue to go on and on and on like this? And we have to be honest about that. Because the truth is, the reason it continues is that politicians want to get power, and they want to stay in power. And the corporations and the wealthy have the money and influence to help them do that. But we also have to be honest about the fact that the system is not only plagued by this financial corruption, it is also plagued by a deep moral corruption of persistent racism and classism and exploitation of workers and everyone who doesn't have a voice. What do we say? What does it say to Latino families in the state of Rhode Island that Rhode Island ranks 50th out of the 50 states for the education of Latino children? What does it say to African American families that we do even worse by their children? What does it say to the care workers, mostly women, mostly immigrants, who do some of the most important work in our society, caring for our children, caring for the elderly, caring for the sick, and are paid on average in this state $11.50 an hour? What does it say to them that that's the state we live in today? What does it say to a woman I met who lives up near the top of Bucks Hill in Burrillville, that our government has pushed to build a fracked gas plant that will be so polluting that with a daughter in their home who has asthma, they're going to be forced to leave their home? What does it say to the people in this community, from here to the water, the people of South Providence, that the other fossil fuel plan that our state has is to expand the LNG facility, that in this community, another polluting facility, in a community that already has a 40% higher asthma rate than the rest of the state because of all of the industrial pollution lined up on the edge of South Providence? What does it say to all the families who work harder than they've ever worked, who are working 3 jobs, the parents who cannot get home in time to see their children, when they see everyone else at the top getting more and more and more? I think it's very simple. I think what all of this is saying to all of these people, to almost all of us, that's almost all of us, I would say, in this state, it's saying to them, you're not valued, you don't matter, and you're on your own. This is a broken system, a system that is financially broken, politically broken, and morally broken. So as John Lewis says, we need to get in the way, and we need to build something new. And that starts by being clear with ourselves and with each other and with everyone in this state what our purpose is. Now, the current governor has defined the job of governor as selling the state to businesses to get them to come here. That is not how I define the job of governor. I define the job of governor as looking out for the people of the state, all of the people of the state. And making it clear to everyone in this state that they are valued, that they all matter as much as everyone else matters, that they all have an equal place and an equal voice, and that they will never be on their own. So, that is my view of what being governor is. That's my definition of what the job is. I have spent most of my life starting and leading organizations with that exact mission, looking out for people, and really nothing else. 25 years ago, as Marilyn told you, I was a co-founder of City Year here in Rhode Island. City Year, as Marilyn said, gets young people of different backgrounds to do a year of full-time community service, tutoring kids in our schools, solving problems. They get a scholarship for college at the end. And it has worked. It has been here for 25 years. It has grown to 28 cities across the country. It became the model for President Clinton's AmeriCorps, much thanks to the inspiration that he got from Maryland. And there's now been, through AmeriCorps, 1 million young people who have served their country all across the United States. After City Year, I went to law school, came home, and challenged an incumbent Democrat in a primary for Secretary of State who had the full backing of the political establishment. Does that sound familiar at all to what's going on here today? And with a massive grassroots campaign, we won that election, and I went on to win the general election with 68% of the vote, and went there to do civic education to get more people, especially young people, people of color, involved in our political process, and crack down on the corporate lobbyists who were not reporting their activities and their spending at the State House so that we could hold them accountable and make sure that our government was trying to work for the people and not for the connected and the well-financed. And then I started an international nonprofit organization called Global Zero, where we got governments together to work through solutions to lower the tensions between them and reduce the nuclear weapons in the world. We worked very hard for the 2010 treaty between the United States and Russia that reduced strategic nuclear arsenals by 1/3. We worked very hard for the Iran nuclear deal that blocked Iran from getting a nuclear weapon. We were nominated for a Nobel Peace Prize. It's a long process. We've certainly made a lot of progress on the way. We will get there, and the world is already a safer place for the good work that everyone at Global Zero has been doing over the last 11 years. So I've spent my life running organizations that are dedicated to looking out for people. And as governor, I will make it my job every day to look out for the people of the state, to look out for the children, to look out for working families, to look out for people in every city and every town and of every background, and to look out for the people who look out for people, our nurses, our teachers, our first responders, everyone who looks out for people in this state. So, we are up against a powerful, entrenched political system. And we are told by that system that we can't really solve any of these problems. We can't solve the problems in our schools. We can't really solve the problems of healthcare. We can't solve these problems because there's just not enough money. Sorry, not enough money to go around. Well, that's just not true. This is the richest country in the world. There's plenty of money. The problem is it's all gone to big corporations and big banks and the wealthiest people at the top. So we need new thinking and we need big ideas. We need to think big again in this state. You know, Rhode Island actually had a booming economy for a century and a half. People forget that because we led. The Industrial Revolution was started on the Blackstone Valley River by Samuel Slater, and that led to a booming economy for this state until 70 years ago when the manufacturing started to leave. We need to think big again. And we need to create an economy where the money doesn't all go to the top, but we start to bring money and economic opportunity and power back to people and back to communities. An economy not built on giveouts to giveaways to corporations, an economy built on the unique assets and unique strengths that we have in this state, and that works for people. So, one thing we have in this state, off the coast, is a lot of wind. It's one of the windiest parts of the country. So we should not build a fracked gas plant that's going to pollute and harm communities and as Janine said, that's going to get us stuck not in the 20th century, but the 19th century energy economy. We should be we should take all that wind and take the solar and make Rhode Island the first state in the country that is 100% powered by clean energy. But not only that, we actually have enough, because of that wind, we have enough renewable resources to produce twice the amount of energy we use. So we should be the first state not only producing all of our energy from renewable resources, but the first state to be exporting renewable energy as an industry and a source of revenue in this state. And that will create 10,000 jobs, good jobs that cannot be outsourced because they're tied to our landscape. And the last part of that plan is that we should do in Rhode Island with our wind energy what Alaska has done for years with their oil energy. So that when we build up this wind system and the revenue starts coming in, everybody in the state gets a dividend check. They get a little share of the profits. They get a share of the profits. Why should they get a share of the profits? Well, let me ask you this. When did we decide in this country that because a corporation does some work, and they should get some of the profit, but when did we decide they get all the profit? These are our shared natural resources. No corporation should be able to own the sun, the water, and the wind. It does not belong to them. And we hope that this is a model that could be replicated across the country, because this country and the world is moving at a snail's pace, to the pace that climate change is moving. So we need to create a model here that will light the imagination on fire all across this country, so we can move to clean energy and away from fossil fuels at a rate much faster than the rate we've been moving for a long, long time. And for people who are not a part of this, I have to tell you, you saw my 12-year-old daughter, I've got a 10-year-old son back there, I see a lot of kids here. If you are not working on this, I don't know what is going on in your head. You want to leave them a world on fire, then go home and sit there and wait for it to happen. But this is not your business if you're not going to get involved in this. You've got to be a part of it, you've got to be a part of it right now. One of the fastest growing parts of the economy in this country is clean energy. You know, one of the other fastest growing parts of the economy is healthcare. Cutting Medicaid, as this governor has done, is wrong because it hurts people. It's also really bad economics. We've got in this state one of the best medical schools in the country, Brown University. We ought to have a leading healthcare system. This governor has cut Medicaid. It has hurt people. It has contributed to the breaking of the backs of our hospitals and providers. They're now bankrupt, they're closing, and they're looking to sell themselves to out-of-state corporations, which would be a disaster for the quality of care in this state and a disaster for our economy. I will restore the Medicaid funds. I will work to build a robust local healthcare system, and we will work toward a system that covers everyone by expanding Medicare for all in this state. So we can never get used to the fact, we should never get used to the fact that the school buildings in this state are literally falling apart. It really worries me when I go around the state and talk to people. People should be banging on the streets and banging on the tables about the fact that our school buildings are literally falling apart. With all of the money, all of the resources, all of the leadership, the inventiveness, all of the resources that we have let our school buildings in this state fall apart. We're going to do a bond. I support that, and we need to do that. But the question is, why did we get in a situation where we need to go into debt to fix school buildings for our children? And we need to be honest about this. And I will tell you why we got in this situation. About 20 years ago and through today, and Janine and Maggie touched on this, this state, on a failed economic theory that still is dominant in this state, started to cut taxes on the wealthiest people and on corporations, with the idea that that would trickle down to people and communities. We are now in a situation where it's become so extreme, and you add to that the recent Trump tax cut that's gone almost entirely to the wealthy and to corporations. We're in a situation in this state where lower income people pay a higher tax rate than the wealthiest. The wealthiest people in this state pay the lowest tax rate in the state. And the other thing that happened is we didn't fund our schools for a long time. And that's why the school buildings are collapsing, because of those tax cuts. That's why we have not had the funding or that's why the funding has not been given for English language learner programs, so that we're last in the country for the education of Latino children, which is our fastest growing population. So I will repeal those extreme tax cuts on the wealthiest and corporations and fund our schools. will fix the school buildings and so they don't fall down again. We will train more teachers. We will provide English language learner education programs and end the problem that we've had in the state for so long of being unable or unwilling to provide every single kid in the state a good education, which they all deserve. So, one other thing we need to do is we need to break the legalized bribery that is at the heart of our political system, of corporate contributions going to politicians. So I will announce today that I will take no corporate PAC or lobbyist money, and I've just signed just before we started with some student environmental leaders signed this pledge that says, I pledge not to take contributions from the oil, gas, and coal industry and instead prioritize the health of our families, climate, and democracy over fossil fuel industry and profits. But first we have to win this election. So, and we are up against a powerfully entrenched, heavily financed system. And so I return to John Lewis, who says we need to get in the way, but he really meant we need a lot of people to get in the way. And that's why we're here tonight. And I look at the room here and I feel like we're gonna have the forces to get in the way of this system. So, but to do that, to get the numbers we need, and we need big numbers to overcome the powers that we're up against, we're going to need to, all across the state, find ways to get over all these things that have divided us for so long, because we need big numbers if we're going to get together. And it's in all of our interest to take on this system and dismantle it and build something better. And I think we need to remember that we know now from DNA studies, recent DNA studies, from all around the world, that we actually all started out together. There were as few as 1,000 of us, human beings, struggling to survive on the African savanna. And we did survive. And we went north, and we spread around the world. But in the process, we found every possible way to divide ourselves against each other. We found race, we found religion, we found nationality, ethnicity, and politics. And so now we are divided, and that makes us powerless. And so we are going to have to reach out, and we're going to have to make sure that people recognize that it is now, these problems are so big that the only way we can solve them is to find a way over these divides. And so when I talk about this, I'm not talking about just coming together, because we started together. I'm talking about reunion, coming back together. And in that reunion is our power. If we can achieve that reunion across our barriers, across what divides us, we will be powerful enough to win this. And our power also comes from hope. Hope that is that voice inside each of us that's like some kind of mystical memory that says, life shouldn't be this hard. That says, it shouldn't be such a struggle and such fear. That says, we ought to expect more. That says, I know there's something better out there for us. And I believe that as strongly as I believe anything. So, when John Lewis crossed that bridge, he didn't walk alone. He was arms in arms, with a row of people. And not just one row. I'm sure many of you have seen the photographs, but row upon row. And not just any people, but people who had found hope in the hardest possible place to find it, and who had found conviction, and who had committed to each other, and who were willing to sacrifice, and and did sacrifice, because they knew that on the other side of that bridge was victory and a better world. So if we can go out here today together and go forward together, linked arm in arm, then I have no doubt that we can change the system, that we can do our part to bring that better world into place for us and our kids, confident in the knowledge that Dr. Martin Luther King was right when he said unarmed truth and unvarnished love, unconditional love, unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word. Thank you very much.